Why on earth would God choose that time randomly to just come out of nowhere and say, by the way, don't worry about my dietary laws anymore? So there's something more going on here. Peter's vision in Acts 10 proves that God abolished the dietary laws. Peter's vision in Acts 10 proves that God abolished the dietary laws. This is a passage. You won't really see this being brought up in scholarly circles very often, but in popular culture, as you deal with these types of discussions with people, you'll find that in popular circles this gets brought up a lot. But let's go ahead and read the passage and see what the objection is here. Starting in verse 9, the next day as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up on the housetop about the 6th hour to pray, and he became hungry and wanted something to eat. But while they were preparing it, he fell into a trance and saw the heavens opened and something like a great sheet descending, being let down by its four corners upon the earth. In it were all kinds of animals and reptiles and birds of the air, and there came a voice to him, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean." And the voice came to him again a second time, saying, "What God has made clean, do not call common." This happened 3 times, and the thing was taken up at once to heaven. All right, so again, if you single out those verses, it appears, I would admit that if those were the only verses in that chapter there, if that was all it said, I would admit that it definitely seems to say that God is abolishing his dietary laws right there. And he's actually commanding Peter to break those commandments, saying, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat these unclean animals." So here's how you can answer this objection. First, it's worth pointing out that Peter refused when God told him in the vision to kill and eat. He said no. Why did he say no? Because he was a Torah-observant Jewish follower of Yeshua. So it didn't make sense to him that God would all of a sudden show up out of nowhere randomly for no reason and say, "Oh, by the way, Peter, go ahead and eat unclean animals now." That just is completely random when you read the entire story in context and you see what's happening. Why on earth would God choose that time randomly to just come out of nowhere and say, "By the way, don't worry about my dietary laws anymore"? So there's something more going on here. And the passage goes on to say that Peter did not understand the meaning of the vision. And this is a big point right here. In Acts 10:17, it says, "Now while Peter was inwardly perplexed as to what the vision that he had seen might mean, behold, the men who were sent by Cornelius, having made inquiry for Simon's house, stood at the gate." So it says that Peter was confused by the vision. Now it's often said that this passage is obvious proof that God allows us to eat unclean animals. They'll say, "Dave, right there, it's obvious. God tells them to go kill and eat unclean animals." Well, if it was so obvious, then why didn't Peter understand it? If the vision is so obvious about God disregarding his dietary laws, why didn't Peter get it right off the bat? It says he was confused. It said he was inwardly perplexed. So maybe I would like to submit that maybe God wasn't telling Peter that it's now okay to eat pigs, rats, and vultures. Maybe he was trying to teach Peter something deeper, and that deeper message was what Peter was confused about. This is a quote by Dr. Robert W. Wall in his commentary on Acts. He says, "Peter's failure to get his vision is not the result of a hardened resistance or a spiritual obduracy, but reflects the sheer difficulty of deciphering the symbols of God's message." So basically what he's saying here is Peter wasn't just some stubborn legalist. He wasn't just some idiot, all right, or holding on to these old commandments that God said were done away with. No, he was honestly having a hard time understanding the symbols of the message. He was having a hard time understanding, God, what are you trying to teach me through this? Okay? So here is my interpretation of this passage for your consideration. Many Bible commentators understand that God was using symbolism here in order to make a point. The overall message did not apply to the symbols God used in the vision, but rather to what the symbols represented. In this case, the unclean/common animals in the vision symbolized Gentiles. The point is that God wanted Peter to take the gospel to the Gentiles. Okay? So it was a symbolic message. God was using symbolism to teach him a deeper message. And that is made all the more clear as we keep going. In Acts 10:19-20, it says, "And while Peter was pondering the vision, the Spirit said to him, 'Behold, 3 men are looking for you. Rise and go down and accompany them without hesitation, for I have sent them.'" So Peter went with the men sent by Cornelius. Who was Cornelius? Cornelius was a Gentile. So what's going on here is that God was trying to arrange this meeting between Peter and Cornelius. And so that's why God gave the vision, and he was teaching Peter that he is to go and share the gospel with Cornelius. So when they arrived at Cornelius' home, Peter finally understands the vision. And this is the key to understanding Acts 10 right here in this verse. Acts 10:28 says, "And he said to them, 'You yourselves know how unlawful it is for a Jew to associate with or to visit anyone of another nation. But God has shown me that I should not call any person common or unclean.'" I should not call any person common or unclean. So Peter remembered God's vision, and he said that God showed him something. What did he say God showed him? Did God show him that we need to start serving ham sandwiches at Oneg? No, no. What he said, God showed him through the vision was that he is not to consider Gentiles unclean because God calls them clean. So before, just for a little historical context here, before Peter's vision, he thought the gospel was only for Jews. And that's why he was influenced. The reason for that is he was influenced by a very anti-Gentile attitude that existed among many of the Jews in the first century. But this attitude, of course, was unbiblical. God has always desired a relationship with Gentiles, and he allowed Gentiles to come and follow him. God never called Gentiles unclean or common. Men did. So that's why he told Peter, "What God has made clean, do not call common." So there's no need to come up with our own interpretation of Peter's vision. There's no need to try to figure out what it means. Peter already gives us the interpretation. It was all about Gentiles. It had nothing to do with God doing away with his dietary laws. Hey, thank you guys for watching this short video. Please make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And don't forget to click the notification bell so that you'll be notified whenever more videos are uploaded. Thank you again. Blessings and shalom.